Call this meeting of the Westwood Finance and Warrant Commission to order. I'll also grant permission to Westwood Media Center to live stream and videotape the meeting. Is there anyone else that wishes to record the meeting? All right. We are doing hybrid again, so we'll have some participants remote. See Ryan's on. I think a few more people might come on as well. Welcome to everyone. Guess we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic, stands one nation, indivisible, freedom and justice for all.
Member roll call.
All right, Bill Bruce.
Here.
Mike Gad,
Here.
Alex Yao.
Here.
Caitlin Jersey. Christopher Marks. Chris Pareda.
Here.
Christine Cannon. George Lahan. George Maroon.
Here.
John Carey. Mike Powers.
Here.
Brian Sturma.
Here.
Seth Frederickson.
Here.
Susan Flanagan Cahill.
Here.
Nice picture, Ryan.
And John's on too now. He was stuck in the,
In the 6th, yeah, that's okay.
yeah, I put him on too. So we haven't much.
Your introductory comments?
I don't have much in my introductory comments today. I think this meeting today is really kind of focused on a discussion around community economic development, which we'll get into in a minute. Alan and Nora are on to join us to have that discussion. So appreciate folks attending in person and virtually. Next month's meeting will be in person on December 4th. We have a pretty packed agenda with a bunch of topics, so I expect it'll be a little longer based on topics we have the meeting, and we'll continue to work to get everything out about a week in advance. Good for my updates, so I think we could hand it over.
I'll move. You can probably slide and make room. Chris, you want to move to the left or right? Come on, here you go, right here. Oh, you have your choice now.
Nora's kind of driving the bus on the presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions as they come up.
You can see the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Here, I
I'll get in there.
can-
So I think Nora, you should have control. I think I gave you.
All right. Hello, everyone. I don't think I have permission to share yet. Could you make that change?
You know, the volume. Control over there.
Did that do it?
Okay, looks like I'm in. All right.
Roll the volume on the owl.
Is it too here?
Thank you for having us. And my understanding is you were looking for some information about the Office of Community and Economic Development, as well as about the Planning Board. So we've made a similar presentation. It seems to be about every 2 years. So if there are any questions that this presentation doesn't answer, feel free to go back and look at presentations from the past year. See how I can move this forward. All right, so the Department of Community and Economic Development has a number of different divisions. We include building, planning, conservation, zoning, licensing, housing, health, economic development, and historic preservation. And we also provide assistance to a number of boards in those areas. So we serve the Planning Board, the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Conservation Commission, the Board of Health, the Housing Partnership, the Fair Housing Committee, the Westwood Historical Commission, the Alcohol Review Commission, Alcohol Review Committee, and Land Use Committee. Those last two boards are I guess, internal staff related meetings. So here's an organizational chart for anyone who's new to the FinCom or just not really up on how the Department of Community and Economic Development works. So I'm the Director of Community and Economic Development. I'm appointed by the town administrator, and then I oversee various staff members in different divisions. So first there's the building commissioner, and the building commissioner has staff members. He has a building division specialist. He has building inspectors and electrical and plumbing inspectors. The building commissioner is the only one of the principal division heads that do not staff another board, a land use board of any kind. Next, we have the zoning and licensing agent. And the zoning and licensing agent serves as staff to the Zoning Board of Appeals and also runs the Alcohol Review Committee, which provides recommendations for licensing applications to the town administrator and through the town administrator to the select board. Then we have the conservation agent. Conservation agent serves as staff to our Conservation Commission. Conservation Commission reviews wetlands applications as well as applications filed under our stormwater management bylaw. Next, we have the town planner. The town planner also has a housing and land use planner who reports to him. And the housing and land use planner staffs the Housing Partnership and the Fair Housing Committee. And both the housing and land use planner and the town planner together staff the planning board. And the Housing and Land Use Planner also helps work with us on the Land Use Committee, which also reports back to the town administrator. Then we have the Health Director. The Health Director has three employees: the Food Inspector Sanitarian, the Public Health Nurse, and the Health Administrative Assistant. And together they all staff the Board of Health. And then finally, we have a single administrative assistant, the Department of Community and Economic Development Administrative Assistant, who serves all of the different functions and also provides staff to the Historical Commission. Just one caveat there, the Historical Commission has not had a quorum of members for nearly a year now, so they actually have not met recently. So here's a list of ongoing projects that the department is working on. At University Station, we have a couple of projects that are in the works that are a little bit slow in coming about. One is the Home 2 Hotel. That development was granted project development review in 2022 by the planning board, has not yet gone to the building permit stage. They're reassessing their ability to construct the hotel at that location due to changes in the construction environment and changes in cost. So they are still working on that, and we expect to hear more shortly. Then we have the Dana-Farber Proton Therapy Facility. That's a project that the select board approved the sale of the property from New England Development to Dana-Farber based on a community service agreement, but we actually haven't seen any application go forward yet for project development review or for a full community service agreement to be signed by the select board. So that's also a project that's on hold. We hope to see go forward in the somewhat near future. At 215 University Avenue, within the core development area, we have the last of all the spaces that are in that area under renovation to open a Kohler signature store and showroom. And that's expected to open later this month. Once that opens, all of the University Station core retail area storefronts and restaurants will all be completely full. And then we have Chase Bank at 174 University Avenue. They're in the process of taking over what had been Casa Loca restaurant and was Bonefish Grill before that. Chase Bank has received its approval from the planning board for project development review, and they are now going through the building permit stage. At Islington Center, we have three projects in the works. One is at 190 Washington Street. That's the former Patterson and Eastern Insurance Company building. And that has a proposal that was approved by the planning board as a environmental impact design review approval, EIDR. And that will be an office on the second floor and personal services, specifically a hair salon on the first floor. They received their planning board approval sometime in early 2024, I believe, and they are now at the building permit stage. They are recently working on the demolition of the existing building, and then they'll construct a new building at that site. We also have 436 Washington Street. That's a mixed-use office and multifamily residential property. That's the former K&S printing facility at the corner of Washington Street and Clabbertree Street. That received its approval from the planning board as a flexible multiple use overlay district approval and is nearing completion of construction. They expect to have the 5 one-bedroom apartments that are on the second floor ready for occupancy by early February. All 5 of those apartments will be affordable apartments, and they have all started a marketing program for lease as affordable units. And then we have 22 Everett Street. That's a mixed-use residential and retail service facility. That's on Everett Street where the Foster Block site used to be, or a lot of people refer to it as the Tumble Bus site. This project received planning board approval under the Mumford District, which is Westwood's response to the MBTA community zoning law. And the approval was granted in December of 2023, and they are now in the process of constructing. There was a period of time that was spent bringing the building, bringing the site up to compliance. It had been a former Superfund site, and the former property owner cleaned up the property so that the new property owner could come in and build what will eventually be 2 buildings. Right now, they're working on construction of the first building. Then in the High Street area, we have a few new developments. One is Barcino Restaurant at 569 High Street. That's the former Chiara restaurant, and that is opening next week. So a week from tonight on the 19th, if anyone's available, there'll be a ribbon cutting at 4 p.m. and the restaurant will open right after that. So that's an exciting development. At 689 High Street and 693 High Street, both within the Good Plaza. That's the building that has the toast office on the far left and on the far right, and the post office on the far left. There'll be 2 new users. One is Benone Hair Salon, which is opening a new space there, and the other is a Medi Spa. And both are expected to open any day now. I think there are just a couple of overall property-related concerns that have to be addressed, including parking and dumpster enclosures. So the property owner's working on those, and as soon as those are completed, both of these spaces will receive their certificates of occupancy, and they'll be able to open the new businesses. Some other ongoing projects, we have 24M Lithium-Ion Research and Development Facility. That's located at 26 Dartmouth Street. It's been under construction for a little bit over a year now. It received planning board approval as a flexible multiple use overlay district property, and it was recently before the planning board for a modification of that approval to make some very minor site changes, but also to establish an administrative process for reviewing hazardous materials so that when there are changes in materials types or quantities, they can be reviewed administratively and approved by the fire department, the health department, the building department, and with input from the Dedham Westwood Water District. So that'll make it a more streamlined process, and we'll be able to more easily stay on top of any changes that will occur in that research and development facility. Then we have the Mercedes-Benz property, Mercedes of Westwood. They're expanding their showroom and repair facility at 425 Providence Highway. That project's been under construction for about 6 months now and should be finished probably in the early spring. We have Obed Baker House, which is another flexible multiple use overlay district project. This is on High Street. It's the old red building that's next to Dunkin' Donuts. That was owned by the town for many years, for about 14 years. We tried different requests for proposals to sell the property to someone who would restore the historic house. We were finally successful and sold it to Todd Sullivan Construction. And Todd is planning a renovation of the historic home for use as 2 rental units or condos. I don't think he's decided whether he's renting them or selling them, but 2 residential units, one on the first floor, one on the second floor, with appropriate historic addition on the back of the building. That was approved by the planning board, I think just about a year ago. And there's a land next to that Todd had received approval to develop as a veterinary clinic. It's my understanding that the agreement he had with a veterinary clinic operator is no longer in place, and he's looking to find another use for that, another commercial use. So we might hear more on that in the future. Then we have Dedham Westwood Water District at University Station. Their facility there, they're having an expansion for a PFAS treatment facility to be added essentially to the front of the property on University Avenue. That was approved by the planning board last spring, I believe, and that is expected to go into the permitting stage in the next few months. They're still working on design. Next, we have the Westwood High School Solar Canopy Project. This is something that was approved by the planning board in 2023 and then modified in this past spring and is coming back to the planning board at its next meeting, likely on November 19th, possibly on December 10th, for further modifications to that proposal. And that would include solar canopy structures to be put in the student parking lot at Westwood High School. Next, we have the Fire Station 1 redevelopment. That project received its EIDR approval from the planning board last Thursday night, and that one is now heading to the Zoning Board of Appeals. There's a hearing tomorrow night on that, where they're requesting 7 variances and a special permit. The project is also under review by the Conservation Commission for a stormwater management permit, and that is in December. And then we're also working on zoning bylaw amendments that the planning board's interested in considering. We're working on comprehensive plan implementation actions. That's an ongoing effort that's been in place since the comprehensive plan was adopted in 2020. And this year we saw all the different boards, agencies, and departments report to the planning board on where they stood with the various actions, implementation actions that were assigned to them. There are just, I believe there are only 3 entities that still have to report to the planning board: the Department of Public Works, the Disability Committee, and the Dedham Westwood Water District. And I expect those presentations to be either at the November 19th or December 10th meeting. And then finally, one other thing that's upcoming this time of year is the alcohol and common victular license renewals. So our zoning and licensing agency is well in the throes of that, working with every property in town that has either an alcohol license or a restaurant service license. And they will all be brought to the select board at its meeting, I believe, on December 9th. For renewals of all of those licenses. It also covers more than just alcohol and common victular licenses. There are licenses for taxis and livery services, licenses for Class 1 and Class 2 auto sales, for junk dealers. Any license that you need in town from the select board is renewed on an annual basis at the December meeting. 2 other projects that are ongoing are planning projects. One is the Climate Action Resiliency and Sustainability Plan. This is commonly called the CRS Plan. This has been in the works for about a year and a half now, and a public hearing is going to be scheduled for the planning board's December 10th meeting. If anyone has any questions about this, please call Elijah Romulus, our town planner, or send him an email. You can also take a look at the plan. The draft plan is posted to the town's webpage. And then we're working on an update to our housing production plan. That is also an ongoing project. There's an open survey right now that closes on November 17th. So if you haven't already taken the survey, we invite you to do that. Again, you can look at the draft plan on our town website. And there's a housing production plan visioning session that is now scheduled for December 12th. This will be an in-person discussion session in the library community room from 7 to 8:30. And from here, I'll turn it over to Ellen to go through the slides on explaining the planning board, what the planning board's authority is, and what they've been up to.
All right. I hope I'm loud enough here. So as you can see, our charter defines in section 4, a planning board of 5 members shall be elected for 3-year overlapping terms, and members shall serve without compensation. So our board does not get a stipend. The board shall meet regularly and shall maintain a public record of its proceedings, resolutions, and determinations. And this is the important part. It shall be responsible for the general, physical, economic, and environmental planning of the town under the general laws, this charter, and town bylaws. That's the bulk of the work we do, is edit our town bylaws, bring, to be in compliance with state law and also our local goals. And also we evaluate our projects against the bylaws, both town and planning, zoning bylaws, to make sure that when someone brings a project forward, that they're actually compliant. And if they're not, we make suggestions about how their project can become compliant with our local bylaws. That's kind of a really high level overview, and I'm happy to open it to questions after I finish going through the slides. So what we've been up to, as far as warrant articles go, we've started kind of having a really high level conversation about what areas we might either need to look at or want to look at for Springtown meeting in 2025. The first item that we will need to address is our current bylaw on accessory apartments caps the number of accessory apartments at, I believe it's 2% of the total number of housing units in town. Recent state legislation has mandated that we can no longer have a cap on the number of accessory units. They are now allowed by right at any single family property. One is allowed by right. You still would have to apply for a special permit if you wanted to have an additional one. There are still parameters around what constitutes an accessory apartment. I believe that it still has to be under 900 square feet. There's still language about what constitutes an accessory apartment. But once that change takes effect, Nora, I believe it's February that goes into effect, correct?
Correct. February 2nd.
February 2nd, 2025, our bylaw will no longer be legal. Yeah, because we will be not in compliance with state law. So we need to look at our bylaw. From my perspective, it's a relatively simple change. We just have to remove the cap. But we're starting to look at that. We're also waiting for guidelines from the state. They may have more to say, and they may have more requirements that we're unaware of. So that's on our radar, but we haven't really started drafting too much of that because we don't have the guidelines yet. We are also looking at definition of affordable housing and affordable dwelling units. So right now, and Nora, I never explained this quite right, but our affordable housing units threshold is at 80%. Is that correct, Nora?
Correct. So right now, if you're building any special permit housing in Westwood, or if you're building housing under the Mumford mixed-use multifamily residential development bylaw, if you have to have 15% of the total number of housing units as affordable housing. And our current definition of affordable housing says that those units have to be available to households earning no more than 80% of area median income. The definition change that the planning board will consider for a town meeting warrant article is to, instead of having all of the units be 80% area median income, to allow some of them to be 60%, 50%, 30%. They're going to take a look at what numbers work best. And they actually, although it's not in our bylaw to require this, they actually achieved voluntary compliance with this idea from the property owner for the 22 Everett Street project, Petruzziello Properties. They agreed that a certain, I think it was 3 of the 23 affordable units that were required, 3 of those units will be offered to households earning no more than 60% of area median income. So the proposed change here is to give some flexibility in that definition to allow the planning board to not just encourage the different types of affordable housing, but to actually require it.
Thank you. yeah, we figured it's a way to provide additional opportunities, for folks. And then section 9.9, mixed use and multifamily residential overlay district, Mumford, as Nora mentioned, that was Westwood's answer to the MBTA zoning. We're saying if needed, so the Attorney General approved our article from last spring, so that it was step one as in becoming compliant. We're still waiting for, I still call them DHCD, but the, what is it, the economic.
Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities.
They changed their name. They still have to finish evaluating our bylaw and make sure that we're compliant with the guidelines. So we passed the step of our bylaws are compliant as far as the Attorney General is concerned. But depending on what happens with the next step, we may need to make some changes. We're hoping we don't. So that's where we're at with that. I don't believe we're looking to do much if we are compliant. That's the sense I got from the board right now. And then we always have a housekeeping article. As far as I know, Nora, right now, we don't have anything that would need attention, but that's usually if we find typographical errors in a bylaw and we want to have a chance to fix it, or nothing that's usually particularly impactful changes. So we like to keep that open, and if we find we have no need for it, we would likely just pull the article.
Would you like to take questions now?
Sure, we can stop after the zoning bylaw stuff and take questions on that, and then we can move on to the rest. Sure. So yeah, if anyone has.
Yeah, two questions for me. How does that kind of lowering of that required, I'd say, income measure, how does that benefit the town?
How does that benefit the town?
This is the affordable housing. No.
Oh, section 2.0. Okay, the AMI. Gotcha.
Yeah, how does that 80% go into 60, 50, 30? How does that benefit the town?
It benefits residents of the town who are looking for units that cannot afford them at the rental rates that are allowable at the 80% median income. So for example, at 80% median income, for a family of 3 people, that's currently $117,250. So if you're earning that amount or less than that amount, you're eligible for an affordable apartment in Westwood at 80%. That's obviously a rather high earnings amount, and the rents would be based on that. So what the rent would be based on is 30% of that total median income. So for 117,000, you'd have to pay 30% of that for rent. If we have families, households who are not earning that much, they're not able to pay the affordable rent. Affordable rents in Westwood now range from about $2,100 to about $3,500 a month.
Does that get voted on, that percentage, or did like those 3 units that you were describing on the Everett Street, did that get voted on, kind of that 80% to 60%? I'm just curious on the process that has to go through.
It goes through the planning board. So that's a special permit that's issued by the planning board, and the planning board members voted to grant that special permit. There are 15% of all the units in that development. That development had 160 units. 15% of those units had to be affordable. I think that comes out to 24 units. And of those 24 units, 21 were offered at 80% area median income, and 3 were offered at 60% area median income.
Mm-hmm. So it's just at the discretion of the planning board and not necessarily the town, like that doesn't go at the town vote?
The town voted to approve the section of the bylaw, and then the planning board reviews the applications under that bylaw. So the requirement for that bylaw is 80%. That's the threshold that a developer has to offer the apartments to people who meet that affordability requirement. In this case, the planning board asked the developer to go beyond that and take in less rent for 3 of those apartments in order to provide housing to people who are most in need of housing. And that's something that we're seeing increasingly among our residents, family members who are looking to move out of their parents' homes, or elderly folks looking to move in who are looking for a place that they just can't afford otherwise.
No, understood. But I mean, we want to keep high standards here in Westwood, I'm assuming, and I just want to make sure I understand the process, right? Like, what is the process for just making sure that, what if it goes to 30%, right? Or 20% or 50, like, well, I just want to see what measures we have, right, as the finance committee to have input on measures like that, or how that would potentially bubble up to town meeting.
So all of these articles would be articles that are brought to town meeting voters, and before they go to the voters, they come to the Finance and Warrant Commission for a review of the article, and then the Finance and Warrant Commission either recommends approval of the article or recommends indefinite postponement. Then it goes before the town voters at town meeting, and those voters would decide whether
So,
or
and
not.
apologies, I'm new this year, so that measure, right, to have those three specific units go down to 60% of the average income, and maybe I'm explaining it poorly, that was kind of reviewed and approved as part of the kind of the bylaws last year. Is that right?
No, no,
Let me take a shot, Nora, let me take a shot at it, because I think there's two different things getting mixed up here a little bit. The Everett Street project was a separate project in and of itself, which the planning board has the authority through the process to work with the developer to make some adjustments around that. So I think, if I'm correct, within that project scope, which that does not go through FinCom because it's a project that goes through planning board, they could make those adjustments. What's on the screen that they're talking about is looking more broadly at the actual bylaw and making a universal change to the bylaw is a potential, and that would come to us because it's a universal bylaw change across everything. But still, even within that, if something were passed, the planning board still has the authority within an individual project to make adjustments. Did I get that right?
Awesome.
Yes, you did.
correct. So what this would do is set the base. So right now, the baseline is 80% median income. The planning board can always request a developer to provide more affordable housing than that, but the developer is not obligated to do so because our bylaw sets the floor at 80%. If the bylaw was changed by town meeting voters to have some 80%, some 60, some 30, then the developer would be responsible. They would have to do that. That wouldn't be something that would just come at the planning board's discretion.
Yeah, okay, got it. No, Bill, first off, thank you for that. That helped, solidify that. I mean, I just keep on seeing other towns push back, right, against this NBTA measure, right, that we approved last year, which is perfectly fine. I just want to make sure that, right, we're maintaining high standards here. So, I guess we'll kind of review the bylaws or, as they're kind of analyzed and proposed for this upcoming year. But no, thank you for that. Appreciate that.
And just to be clear, this would not affect MBTA community law. So the properties under the MBTA community law, the Mumford district that we've approved, that's set with a 15% of affordable units at 80% AMI. This would affect other special permit residential projects in town.
Yeah. I'm speaking holistically in terms of, affordable housing in Westwood, both now and going forward. So understood. Thank you.
I can speak, you asked, your first question was, what's the benefit to the town? And I can give you my opinion on that as someone who's lived here for the better part of my life. When I was a kid, I had neighbors that were nurses and firefighters and teachers, and now I don't. And I speak to our police and I speak to our fires. Most of them can't afford to live here. And I personally see this as a way to open up the town again to some of our public service employees and others that, to me, that's a benefit to the town in making room for people like our police officers and our firefighters and our teachers to be able to afford to live here again. So that's part of the reason that I am personally interested in that, because I would like to see some of that come back. But again, that's just my opinion. But that question caught my attention, is what's the benefit to the town financially? I don't know that there's an answer to that, but holistically, that's kind of where I come at it from. So I don't know if that's
understood. Understood. Pros and cons. I get it. Balancing both. So no, understood. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good
Ellen.
question. Yes.
Go back to the accessory apartment issue now. I understand that's a state mandate. So we go from 2% to everyone in town will have the ability to put
every single family home, right? Nor if you're a multi, I don't believe it applies.
That's correct.
So accessory is another word for in-law? Is
Yes.
that a good way to look at it?
Yes.
And will the tax benefits occur for the town from a standpoint that additional revenues will come in from that?
That's a good question. Nora, do we
It would
know?
if the tax assessor values a property differently because it has an accessory dwelling unit. So that's not something we have any control over, but it's up to the tax assessor to determine whether an accessory apartment has value over and above the single family home.
And will there be restrictions relative to a homeowner having the ability to bring people in?
I don't believe it's legal. That conversation came up before, because I think at one point people wanted restrictions on accessory apartments to be to family members and whatnot, and I believe we were told we can't do that.
So that's not permissible, but that also isn't part of our existing bylaw. So right now, our bylaw allows an accessory apartment with a special permit, and the number of special permits that can be granted are limited to no more than 2% of the total number of single and two-family properties in town. But there's no restriction on who can live there, whether they could rent the apartment or just be a family member that lives in the apartment. We do currently have a restriction that either the overall principal property or the accessory apartment has to be owner occupied, and the state law does not allow us to keep that requirement. So that would have to be lost. The limit of 2% would go away. What would stay is no more than one accessory unit per principal dwelling, and an accessory unit could be no larger than 900 square feet. So those are two requirements that we have now that would be maintained. Instead of going to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit, we'll be proposing a process where you go to the Planning Board for an EIDR, Environmental Impact Design Review approval, to make sure that the property still maintains its appearance and function as a single-family home, where the accessory structure is clearly accessible to the principal use, accessory to the principal use, that it's not the same as a two-family home. It's a single-family home with an accessory apartment.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Ellen,
Yeah.
notwithstanding Nora's very cogent explanation of this worst case scenario, let me play the devil's advocate here. Since every single one of us who live in a single family home can now have an accessory home, it turns every single family lot into a multifamily residence.
In theory, I had that same thought, but, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nora, we're still allowed to impose setback requirements so that if a home can't physically put another, like, I think that some of the smaller
Yeah, it
lots
doesn't
might.
automatically qualify every.
Right. On paper, I had the same reaction. I said, oh, that's going to be an interesting challenge, but some of the smaller lots might find it challenging to physically fit an accessory unit.
You mentioned in passing a 900 square foot limit on the size.
And I think
900 square foot, and that's the current limit. And that can be either in part of the principal dwelling building already. So it could be in a section of the home, it could be in the basement of the home, or it could be in an accessory structure to the home. For instance, someone could convert their garage into an apartment, or an old barn on the property into an apartment, or they could build a new structure, a tiny home in their backyard. As long as it's no larger than 900 square feet and clearly not changing the principal use of a single family home, it's clearly accessory to that home, then we would have to permit it. We could also require parking at one parking space for an accessory unit. So you'd have to also have room on your property to accommodate another parking space.
except for, if I read it correctly, except for within a half mile of a MBTA
Train
station.
station,
Yeah.
correct.
We can't impose parking requirements for homes that are within that radius. So we have our work cut out for us, and we are still waiting on the guidelines. Sometimes those are where it can get tricky, and we really have to pay attention to the details. As we saw with the MBTA zoning, the law itself seemed very straightforward. The guidelines were not straightforward, so that's where I think our work will.
And just if I could point out one reason that we have to make the changes to our bylaw, we have to propose a warrant article rather than just allow our bylaw to go unenforced. The reason for that is that the state law allows towns to have more than one accessory apartment per
Mhm.
property. So we need to have a bylaw that restricts it to no more than one. And so that requires us amending the current bylaw. If we do nothing, then we're open to applications, by right applications for accessory apartments that are not limited in number.
Thank you. That's a very important point to highlight. So that is definitely on our radar for Springtown meeting. Were there any other questions on that first section of the zoning bylaw? No. Okay, and we can always go back to it if you think of something too. The next one would be a zoning map amendment, the Lambert's Plaza, which is 216 to 310 Providence Highway. The new-ish owners have approached us. That lot is currently zoned as single-family residence, which is, I guess that's a historic, I know, it's always had a commercial use. It's always been kind of in the highway business district. There's never been homes on that lot. So the new owner has approached us and asked us to consider rezoning it as a highway business district, which would bring it kind of in line with the surrounding commercial properties. He's been having, what they've told us is they've had a challenge. They've had some tenants that were interested, but given that they're dealing with a grandfathered use, the process to get a new tenant in is rather arduous, and some of the prospective tenants have been put off because it's just going to take too long. So he's had to turn down tenants. So they've asked us to consider sponsoring a warrant article that would just change that underlying zoning and that, would help them attract new business. So we're looking at that. Any questions on that before I move to the next section? Okay, and then the last handful of things we're looking at, they're kind of planning board interest, but would qualify as general bylaw amendments. They're not under the zoning bylaw code. Tree preservation bylaw, we're looking at that from a few different angles, ways to preserve the overall tree canopy in town, because we see there's been some defoliation when new developments happen, trees go away, and maybe there's a way to make sure that we're not losing so much that our overall tree canopy in town is disappearing altogether. And there's different ways to approach it. There's ways to approach, looking at trees that are over a certain age or size and asking developers and property owners to preserve them and, try to avoid them if they can, or there's tree replacement. So that there's many ways to go about it, but I think there's been planning board interest for a couple of years in trying to find some way forward with that would help preserve the overall tree canopy from kind of a holistic perspective. We're also looking at, or it's just highlighted as the leaf blower bylaw. There's been some interest in looking at regulating the hours and times of year that people can use the gas-powered leaf blowers, because they're very noisy, and they are also, they add air pollution, noise pollution. So we're looking at potentially doing something with that. And there's also been some interest in looking at some of the roads in town that are not currently designated as scenic roads that might meet the criteria. We've heard some interest from some residents that there are roads that I think people think are on that list already that are not. And maybe kind of looking, like Clapper Tree came up. Nora, what was the other one people at?
Gay
Was it Gay
Street.
Street? Gay
Gay
Street.
Street was the other one.
So, roads that I'm embarrassed to say, I always assumed Clapper Tree Street was already designated a scenic road, because to my eye, it meets the criteria in our bylaw. It's not designated a scenic road. So just something we're considering looking at.
Can I back you up
What's
for a
the
second?
downside?
It depends on who you ask.
What, the scenic
To-
road?
to determining it.
Road.
Where's it gonna limit?
If we designated Gay Street as a scenic road, can we not put a sidewalk there then?
I wouldn't say you can't put a sidewalk, but it would give planning boards some extra purview on things like the stone walls and the trees. And it adds an extra layer of protection for certain elements on a road. It doesn't necessarily mean you can't make changes to the road. It just, for roads that have these scenic features, there's an extra layer of protection. And it's funny because there's been I've heard both sides when this came up. People have said, well, I don't want to do something that would be an impediment to progress. But then other folks said, but for the folks who live on those streets that are worried about those features, if they know that those features are going to have some level of extra attention, it might actually help move certain projects forward. So it's an interesting conversation.
Just thinking about it from a cost perspective.
Yeah, definitely.
Can I back you up?
Mhm.
You good? Can I back you up to the leaf blower bylaw?
Mhm.
You mentioned air pollution. If you're just restricting the time it's used, how does that address air pollution?
I think the idea is you're using them less frequently and maybe using electric ones instead, because I think people will still need to do their landscaping work. They may just not be, like in my neighborhood, I hear leaf blowers every day. And if people know that if they don't want to go out and buy an electric one, but they know they can't use the gas powered ones certain times of day, they may just pick and choose when they're actually using the leaf blowers overall, which kind of by proxy lowers the amount of, emissions they're creating.
What is like the genesis of these types of proposals for bylaws?
In general, or?
Yeah, like how many people have come? Is there some level of documentation? Like, is it one person? Is it 1,000 people? Like,
Gotcha.
who's coming to say, I'm concerned about gas powered leaf blower times?
Some of those came out of the research we did for the CRS plan and kind of organically came out of some of the surveys and the visioning sessions that came out of that. I don't have an exact number on that, Nora. Do we have how many people tick that box on their survey, or?
I don't have that information. The survey, I'd have to check with Elijah Romulus, our town planner, that he should be able to tell how many people asked for that on a survey. And then it was discussed at a couple of the visioning sessions as well.
Yeah, I remember that came up at least one of the visioning sessions because I was there.
Who's the survey go out to?
Everybody in town had a
Anyone
chance
who's
to.
interested. Yeah, it's posted on the website. It's advertised in the local paper, and mentioned at all planning board meetings. So people who pay attention, fill out the survey. That's certainly not everyone. I would imagine it's in the hundreds of people that fill out the survey.
I was gonna ask, what percentage of the population filled out the survey?
Right, yeah.
I think the report's at 107.
And I can say I felt like it was very well promoted. Like there was a PSA on Westwood Media Center with a QR code for people to scan. So good question. Obviously we always hope for as high as engagement as we can get, but yeah. And a lot of these come out of just planning board conversations, things that come up over the course of year when we're looking at a project, things kind of come up. If we hear things that come up often during conversations about projects or during our regular work, it can often spawn an idea for a bylaw amendment or a new bylaw.
You guys gotta post these flyers next to the Dunks and Starbucks mobile.
I know. That's
Then
not-
we'll all see it.
That's a good idea. Post the QR code right there on the bulletin board and done.
You guys have concepts behind these three in terms of restricting use of blowers and scenic roads and things like that.
Scenic roads, the criteria for determining a scenic road is outlined in our bylaws. So it's kind of, we would look at a road if there's enough interest in a particular road and then determine whether it meets the criteria. The new leaf blower bylaw and the tree preservation, we've had some high level conversations about that, but we haven't really drafted any language or really gone on a deep dive. Like we wanted to kind of give you guys an idea of the kind of things we're thinking of. Some of these may not move forward at all. Some of these we know have to, like the accessory apartments, we have to do something. But no, we haven't really started our intense work on this stuff yet.
Yeah, it is a little early, but I asked to give us a view now of
Yeah.
what you're thinking, and this list could change.
Absolutely.
As we get.
Right.
to-
We'll be back in January at your sponsor's article night to talk to you about what the planning board is looking to move forward with. So this is just the overall universe of articles that they're considering at this stage. By mid-January, they'll know for sure what articles they're bringing forward.
I really appreciate the early look.
Yeah, no, I think we're happy to do that. And I know our meetings can be quite long, but we're always happy to have you join us or watch them after. They're always recorded, so.
And just for the newer folks, like, so when, like Noah said, they'll come in January, speak to what the warrant articles are they're looking at. That could still change over the course of the next 4 to 6 weeks, where some could get reworked, something could get dropped off and stuff like that. So that's an initial set, but it still can change a little bit
Right.
from that point forward.
Were there any other questions? I would just like to say, like, I know big topic recently was fire station one, because that was intense for us too. Typically, our process would unfold over ideally, 7 or 8 meetings. But because of the timeline, we had 2 or 3, and we were really trying to make sure that our process didn't impact the overall schedule. So I know those meetings, for me, even, they were very intense. Everybody came in with all their questions all at once so that the design team could address them at the very next meeting. And our guiding principles were, we were very cognizant of cost and we're very cognizant of the timeline. So I think we were really trying very hard to make sure that whatever asks we made didn't impact either of those. And I am personally very happy to say we approved their EIDR application, and made a positive recommendation to the zoning board at our last meeting. They were able to incorporate mostly some aesthetic changes, very simple. Like I had asked, can you extend the stonework at the bottom and the banding across the back of the training tower? Because it wasn't there. And I thought the visual impact would be reduced if you did. And they were able to, and that's just one example. It doesn't impact the cost or the timeline. So they were able to add a few things that I think the board felt improved the aesthetics and made it a little bit more in line, a nice balance between the modern architecture and the historic architecture. And we only move forward with the things that Doran Whittier said would not up the price, nor would they change the timeline. And in fact, and Nora, correctly if I'm incorrect, one of the things that we asked for that the firefighters actually really wanted too was, instead of the permanent letters mounted over each bay, equipment bay, they wanted to do signs. And my understanding is that actually shaves off a little bit off the cost. So that was like a positive change that came out of some of the conversations. So I just wanted to speak to that because I heard from residents, they're like, that was a lot in like 2 meetings. And is it always like that? And my response has been, it's the same process we followed for Everett Street, and that, previous incarnation of the planning board followed for Islington Center, and even this library and any project, it just was really kind of condensed. So it seemed a little crazy, but it was nothing out of the ordinary. It was the same back and forth of questions, just all in about 2 meetings instead of over several months. So I know I got that question from a lot of people, so I figured it would be helpful to kind of share that with this board, because if I'm hearing it from residents, I'm sure there's other people who had similar thoughts or questions. Any other questions about any of our kind of more specific stuff?
I'll comment. So I participated in one of your planning board meetings, and the level of detail that your team went into was amazing. And you took the feedback really well. Cost was a concern, as this FinCom needs to look at the overall viability of the project. So thanks for that, taking that feedback and
sure.
Transparency.
Yeah, no, I think we're all, it's always a challenge, whether we want to bring in the best project we can on budget and on time.
Yep.
And I think so far the collaboration and the respect that I've seen between the boards has been excellent. I think we're all listening to each other, which that's the way projects move forward, so we appreciate your feedback on that too. But we're all absolutely, we all have to pay for it. So I think we're all very cognizant of, we want to make sure that we deliver a project that meets the needs, that looks nice, but isn't more expensive than it needs to be. That's my personal perspective. That was what I was thinking. And I do feel that was what the board was trying to do as well. So our upcoming meeting schedule, we have a meeting next week on November 19th to review our initial list of warrant articles and consider additional articles. December 10th, we'll be finalizing the list of warrant articles for submission to the select board, because their warrant opens and closes fairly quickly. I think it's like 2 weeks. January 7th, review the long form of the public hearing notice in advance of the public hearing, because a lot of details, but we also, our process for how we advertise our public hearings is highly specific and dictated by law. So we have dates we have to meet. January 28th, opening of the planning board public hearing, and we'll receive public comment and consider revisions. So that's when our public process really begins. February 11th, continue the public hearing, receive public comment, consider recommended revisions, provide the draft text to you for the February 25th and 26th FinCom public hearing. March 4th, we continue our hearing, receive public comment, and consider recommended revisions. You see a pattern here. We also consider the revisions that come out of your recommendations at your February meeting. March 18th, we continue on, receive more public comment. We will provide our final text to your board for the March 25th, 26th FinCom public hearing. April 8th is our tentative date to close our public hearing and make our recommendations for annual town meeting. And then May 19th will be our annual town meeting. Was there anything I missed, Nora, or anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think you covered it all.
All right, were there any other questions, comments from anyone?
No, we appreciate taking the time to, we have other meetings going on too, to sit with us tonight and kind of walk through and really give folks a view of what's ahead. And I think, Ellen, a huge kudos to you and your team. Because,
Thank you.
Nora too, because it was, I watched some of those meetings too. That was a lot to pack in. That was a lot of hours.
Yes.
6 hours to pack into like a couple weeks span. So
There was a lot of public comment too, which is good. It helped us, you know, it was informational, but yes, no, thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate anyone who took the time to participate, watch, engage in those meetings. It helps us. Everyone who participates, it makes the project better. And that's always our goal. And thank you for having us tonight. It's happy to be here, happy to share what we're doing, get your comments and questions. And yeah, I mean, if you think of any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us, you know, offline. Always happy to have a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Nice job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna scooch away from your tables. Here.
Is there, looks like there's a question.
it was just,
Is that
it was
the,
John being let in. I can't figure out how to make it go away.
You just dismiss it. Yeah,
Oh,
there we go. You're so dismissed, John.
Thank you.
So I guess Mike and I's update, I'll let Mike go in a second. My only update is, so for our next meeting, just what we got on tap, because it'll be busy. We have the fire station working group coming. So I'm sure that conversation can take some time. Tim's coming to give an update on the schools and what's going on there. And then, the charter review folks are coming as well. Mike and I are attending their meeting actually tomorrow to get a better understanding of what they're putting forth, but they're gonna come give us a preview too. So with that, at least by the end of the year, you'll have a preview of all the stuff that might come at us in January and February. So unfortunately, next month, I think will be a good 2 hour plus meeting, but.
our Gina will be open by then. So we're good.
Exactly. We might want to ask them to open late that night.
And then I knew you had
Yeah.
some updates from some of the other meetings.
Yeah, so I wanted to give everybody an update for the previous select board meeting. One of the things that we'll do, we'll take the select board meetings, we'll come back to you. I'm not going to cover everything that they went through, but just the things that I think are relevant to what we do as a board. So first thing was, well, there's a couple of items. One is Islington Center Traffic Signal Study Update. There'll be a full presentation at the next select board meeting on the 18th. They got the geophysical data for the Islington traffic signal. The reason I bring this up, theoretically there shouldn't be much of a cost impact here, but they're looking at the traffic impact with the signals. So that there was one item. Number two, the police chief Silva actually secured a grant, which is why I'm bringing it up, for a mental health clinician specializing in crisis intervention. We're actually sharing this resource. Her name is Veronica Betterman, and it's definitely a big need for the town. I don't know the duration of the funding, if that's something that will hit a subsequent budget on an operational perspective, but more to come on that, and I'm sure the subcommittee can dive into that a little bit more.
Sorry, what are you guys sharing?
We're sharing with another town, so effectively funding where Veronica will, do. I actually didn't say I didn't have a chance to validate what town, but let's, as an example, let's say it was Devon. We'll be sharing her with Devon, just with. Yeah. Let's see. One interesting thing, actually, it doesn't really impact us as a FinCom, but something that I thought was pretty cool. WEAC, the Westwood Environmental Committee, as well as Tom Philbin. They renegotiated a contract where the Westwood standard rate is effectively going to be significantly cheaper than it was. So everybody who's participating, which we believe is about 100% of the town, in either the basic, the Westwood standard, or the advanced, is going to be saving money versus Eversource.
She's on electricity.
Talking about electricity.
Yeah. It's interesting because the Climate Action Task Force report misstates Eversource's rate by a factor of 50%.
Okay.
So I take very suspiciously anything that Tom says about saving money versus Eversource. If you want to do the community aggregation plan, there are other good reasons to do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it to save money.
Understood. Yeah, so the data that, listening to the select board meeting, they were saving a couple of cents below the Eversource charge for the actual electricity. The delivery
Right.
is still something that
Delivery's
Eversource,
the same.
delivery is the same. So I thought that was interesting, and people that are watching, it has a positive impact. Also, the renewable energy is a big factor there. So that was good. There's some FS1 items that I think might hit us from a financial perspective. There was screening behind FS1 that was improperly removed, and the select board wants to basically correct it. However, they can't correct it right away because the planting window is effectively over on this Saturday through the 15th of November. So they're going to target April to basically replace the plantings behind FS1. So again, more to come there. I believe it will all be part of the current budget for FS1, but we'll make sure that that's addressed. If there's additional funding, we'll understand what it is. And then the final item for me is that there was a classification and compensation study update where it was about 15 years since we've done a review on approximately 116 jobs within the town that we just hadn't reviewed the viability of the rates we're paying our employees versus other similar towns. It came back and it was pretty eye-opening where we were underpaying a number of our resources. The negative impact on that is a lot of those positions just weren't being filled, and it was impacting the town in a negative way. So Molly kind of led the charge on this, and if we were to implement it tomorrow, it would be about $133,000 increase to our operational expenses. They're not intending on doing it tomorrow, but it is something that we really need to do as a town. They will take it into consideration for the fiscal year 26 budget. Any additional money that we increase right now will be paid for through the reserves. So again, this has some impact to what we're doing, but all of the budget has to still work within the pie that they come to us with. So
133,000 per year.
Per year, correct, 133,000. And then they also want to do those studies every 5 years. It's been 15 since we've done the last one.
15 years or 2015?
15 years. Yeah, so it's a long time.
You mentioned positions that weren't filled, but they were not filled because of the salary.
They didn't stipulate whether it was salary related or not. That's certainly the implication. And so, again, I think that there's, some of those were recaptured salaries. It's in our budget that we have, $50,000, let's say, for a particular salary. And if it's not filled, obviously we recapture that. So, in general, I think, again, from what was presented to us, this is the right thing to do to be competitive, to get people to want to come work in our town.
Right.
No, so it's 130,000 across those.
Across all of those 116 positions.
And that's just for salary, that's not including benefits.
I think that's fully loaded. Yeah, great question for Molly. And this all has to work within the budget that they present to us. So,
Positions that were norm in terms of.
it's a great question. I would guess the answer is no, but it would be a guess. Again, we're going to have plenty of FaceTime with me and Mark and the team. So, other than that, I strongly encourage everybody to watch board meetings. They're a great source of information, and then also planning board meetings. We have a planning board subcommittee, but getting involved in those meetings and understanding what they do gives you a new appreciation for what they do. That's it.
Any subcommittees have an update? I know.
Well, question, what's the, I know I've seen it, but I don't remember, so forgive me. What's the timing? Because, I think the subcommittee meetings should meet with the respective departments after we've had a chance to see a preliminary budget. Because that's going to be the basis for the conversation. So when can we expect to see a budget to review so we can start scheduling meetings?
Won't see the budgets until I think January at some point.
So
Depends, like
what kind of business could we conduct with them before? Yes, is the question.
Nothing right now. Like,
Okay.
Well, yeah, nothing right now. Each committee is a little different. But probably more of it January, staying on top, but like for planning what their meeting is, what's going on. Maybe listening to one of those meetings in terms of what their warrant articles might be, having somebody listen, and then like in December, kind of give us an update if any of those have dropped off, but really more is wait and see. Probably just meeting. We have quite a few new members this year.
Yeah.
By the time we filled, it'll be a third of our group. So I think making sure the new members to understand the process and how we'll work through things, because it comes fast and furious.
Yeah, for the benefit of the new members, I was, just perusing the internet looking for the recordings of the meetings. Westwood Media has a channel on YouTube and they're all nice and neat in one place. And you can always listen to them in 1.5x speed or 2x speed if you want to get through them quick, so. Great resource to get caught up.
Yeah, it's nothing too much yet, but you'll probably start meeting in January, and then we'll try to schedule the meetings that you have with the town. We're going to try to coordinate it better. So much of their time. We also, based on the last discussion, they have to be posted meetings when we have subcommittee meetings.
Recorded.
Not recorded, just posted at the public hearing, right?
Oh, announced. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
So that issue was resolved.
I think that's kind of the ruling that we got back, is that we have to.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was an open item. I thought we resolved it at that.
No, we didn't. So the resolution from town attorney is if you want to meet and not have it be subject to open meeting, one person meets with, let's say, the police chief and the fire chief, etc. If you want to meet as a group coming together as a subcommittee, you do have to post it. So I guess the school subcommittee last night met and they did post the meeting and they met via Zoom. Theoretically, somebody could join and participate similar to what we have today.
And is there any requirement with regard to format, Zoom versus in person or both? It can be either. So if we meet in person, we just have to announce where the location and time and then.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Do there have to be minutes of the meeting then?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't think
I
so.
mean, if it's about complying with open meeting law. I think-
I thought that was a.
Well, we'll get back to that. I do want to correct one thing. When I was giving the update on.
Yes, minutes are required.
All right, there we go. See, this is where we and I'm also updating something that I get a text on. So when I was talking about the screening behind the FS1, there is no approved money for FS1. If it is part of anything to do with FS1, it will be fall of next year. I thought I heard that they wanted to do it sooner and they would find the money someplace else, but so the screening behind, I know that's an open issue, but there's no approved funding for FS1.
And the screening, presumably it wouldn't then be done up.
No, so that's another thing, like they want to make sure that the plantings are similar species, etc. But no, the idea isn't to put it in for a short term and then rip it up. I get way over my skis on this. Actually, Helen, you may have a better idea of the screening behind that. That's fun. Come on up here.
Yeah.
I'll come to the out.
What we heard during, geez, I don't remember which meeting it was, but there was some concern from the neighbors that there had been some trees, longstanding trees that have been removed by the previous fire chief, I believe during COVID, because he put a trailer there or something, but, the replacement screening he put in, and I've seen it, it doesn't really, it's kind of, in my opinion, insufficient now. Never mind, when the building is significantly larger. So they amended their planting plan to put in some really nice evergreens that will grow tall. I think they said 50 to 60 feet high. So, and don't quote me on that number because I don't have it in front of me, but I remember it was something in that range, 40 to 60 feet maybe, so that it would actually provide a decent visual buffer. And right now it's like a handful of arborvitae with like several feet. It's not screening anything, what's there. So the neighborhood kind of wanted what they had before, which they should have, especially once the building is significantly visually larger than it is now, because it is going to be much taller. So I think the planning board, myself especially, I supported making sure that the planting was sufficient. So there's a reason for that. It's not just, hey, it'd be nice to throw in some extra evergreens.
But they're planning to plant them immediately.
So I'll circle back on this for the next one. I thought I heard in the meeting that they wanted to do it sooner
Yeah.
than when FS1 funding goes through, and so.
Yeah.
And that scenario would
Next
be,
fiscal year.
well, yeah, and if they can find the money, theoretically, they would do it sooner. They would do it starting in April. They would do it with the intention of not having to do a rip out and
Right.
things like that. There's also a scenario that any FS1 money that they have to leverage, it will not be done until the fall. I think I did that correctly, and my phone will light up from.
I
one of
think
the
you're
select
right.
board
That's
members.
what I remember too. That was, the conversation went back and forth a little bit, but because the previous fire chief had not gone through the proper channels to remove the trees, there was a sense that the right thing to do was to try and make it right for the neighborhood sooner rather than later. So I think that's why, but there was a conversation around, can that be done ahead of construction and then not have it be something that needed to be removed again?
Yeah, so the plan is to, is it the fire station, well, the plan is to plant after the special town election.
Because then it would be after, obviously, after April.
So after May 19th,
Right, but if,
because it's gotta go up either way.
yeah, but it wouldn't, assuming the fire station is approved in May, then they're gonna construct it. Having newly planted trees wouldn't interfere with the construction efforts.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think where it is.
I don't know where,
Yeah,
I don't know where
think they
it
want
is.
buffer for
It's
the
on the
neighborhood,
trucks, yeah.
but,
It's
but,
along that particular property line where I'm visualizing the plans. There's not gonna be a lot of activity there construction wise. That's more towards the front. So that did come up in our conversation.
Yeah,
Can
yeah.
you do it without having it be an effort that's going to be kind of for naught? They said they could.
so the
So
fire station working group will be here next month, so they can probably answer more on that, I'm sure.
yeah,
And with any of these plantings, the proponent of the project, in this case, the town, has a continuing responsibility to make sure these plantings survive.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
yes.
It is,
In perpetuity.
I believe our bylaw says if it doesn't survive in the first 2 to 3 years, I don't remember, they have to replace it. It's 2 or 3. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but in general, yes. I mean, because it's a town building, those plantings will become part of the town's responsibility to maintain, trim, nurture, for lack of a better word, but make sure, that they're keeping them healthy.
and actually, it was interesting, they talked about if they plant them, during, pre-construction, they have to plan for watering via truck.
Yeah.
Because there will be no irrigation, no ability to water. So they'll have to incorporate that in.
You would think that a fire department would be able to.
They would have.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Probably the best building for that,
Anyway, so again, what we want to do is bring things like that may have some sort of financial impact in some way. We don't want to give you a play-by-play of everything that they talked about at the select board meeting, but hopefully that's helpful going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any of our meetings.
Yeah.
John, do you have questions? Can you hear me?
John, did you have a question?
I did not, no.
Okay, I just saw you come up mute. I didn't know if you ever waiting there. Any other? Any other new business to Anyone wants to bring up? Any other topic? I don't see any
Resounding no.
public questions. We will have the minutes for the last meeting at the next meeting. We had some technical issues. So we'll have 2 sets of meeting minutes that we'll send out for this meeting. So we'll have to.
That's fine, but I apologize for pushing.
No, it was a good. I missed it.
Because I thought technologically, I thought I was not finding it.
That was the fourth folder that you weren't given access to. There you go. Yeah, no, we'll, I mean, by normal process, we will always have the meeting minutes. Just unforeseen things arose, so we will come back with 2, hopefully, sooner with the October meeting.
Okay, if there's nothing else.
Motion adjourned.
And then we have to do roll call, right?
Make sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Chris Pareda,
Yes.
George Moran,
Yes.
John Kerry,
Yes.
Mike Powers,
Yes.
Ryan Kierna,
Yes.
Seth Frederickson.
Yes.
Susan Flanagan Cahill.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Everybody.